Restaurant Unstoppable, episode 693 with Terry Pham. And with excitement, allow me to introduce to you today's guest, Terry Pham. Terry, are you feeling unstoppable today?
Come on, you bet.
Yes, I cannot wait to dive into your story. But first, let's tell me about what we got going on over here. Tell me, you gave me a little drink here.
Yeah,
Explain
so
I
I got a couple teas here for us. Traditional bubble tea is always shaken, not stirred. And you can see I actually shook your drink. There's a little froth of bubbles at the top. That's why I actually got the name bubble tea. So these cups are really cool because we have a machine that seals it so it won't spill. And then these straws, this fat straw, we don't have the tapioca in here, but normally there's tapioca. The fat straw has a sharp end, and you just pop the top, man.
Pop the top anywhere?
Just like that.
Beautiful. So you make these and then you seal them in-house after you make them. That's interesting.
Yeah.
I like that. That's dick. Cheers.
Cheers, man.
All right, so let's get into who you are. I got to take a sip before I start that. Where's my head? Oh, it's delicious. Thank you. All right.
Bet.
So Terry and Jennifer Pham opened the first Fat Straws in 2002, and despite a challenging economic climate, grew 15 to 20% each year. And in 2007, Fat Straws launched its second location in North Dallas. Even the 2008 recession did not slow Fat Straws' continued growth, due in part to Pham's focus on quality control, outstanding service, community-based marketing, and an emphasis on strong relationships with both customers and employees. Today, Fat Straws has reached a total of 4 locations and is looking to expand across the DFW area to bring happiness in a cup to even more thirsty customers. I cannot wait to dive into your story, but let's get that motivational, inspirational ball rolling with a success quote or mantra. What do you got for us?
Yeah, actually, it's a great question. I'm going to flip it. Rather than talk about success, one of my favorites is from Sarah Blakely.
Okay.
It's something that her dad taught her. It was about reframing failure. And so failure is not tied to outcome. Failure is when you don't try.
Okay.
So what her dad taught her was to celebrate every day at the dinner table. Hey, what did you try? What did you fail at? And they would high five each other.
Isn't mindset so powerful? Just how we perceive things can like literally transform our entire outlook on life.
Absolutely.
It's so powerful. I love that. So say it one more time. Don't focus on.
Failure is not tied to outcome. Failure is not even trying.
I love it, man. Great way to get this thing started. So where does it make sense to start telling your story? Where do you want to bring us? I know your family immigrated to America before you were born.
I think I'll kind of start before I was born. So my father was an Air Force pilot in Vietnam, and before Saigon fell to the communists, my father got our family. My mom was pregnant with me, my 3 other siblings, and aunt and uncle out of Vietnam 3 days before Saigon fell. Ended up, so kind of like set the table with that. Think about it. Like, I don't know if you could imagine like you getting picked up, displaced out of your home, going to another country where 1, you don't speak the language,
right.
2, you don't look like anyone, and literally all you have is the clothes on your back, and you have to start over from scratch.
Oh my gosh!
Right?
Does she? Are there any stories that come to mind of what she told you?
Oh yeah, for sure. And just that journey, like ending up in a refugee camp and trying to figure out like, okay, what are we going to do for work, and where are we going to live, and what can we do for work? And so, my dad having a background as a pilot was really trying to get some work flying, and he was able to get some work. Took us from Arkansas over to Memphis, ultimately settled in Indianapolis. He was working for this upstart charter company, and they were trying to land a pretty big contract with the Evansville, Indiana Aces, which is a basketball team at that university. And so he was a pilot of that plane. The whole team, they were going to another game, and there was bad weather. And unfortunately, that plane crashed. So everyone on that, the CEO of the company, my dad, the co-pilot, all the basketball team coaches, everyone passed away.
Yeah, it's rough, man.
And so then kind of fast forward that to like, okay, now my mom's here with 4 kids. I was 2. How am I going to raise these kids
so just
on my own?
I mean, you're thinking like, okay, it's hard enough, right, to come to this country with nothing to your name but the shirt on your back, right? And then, you feel like there's hope, right? Okay, we got an opportunity, and then this happens, right? And then now your mom's got to do it on her own. I can only imagine, man. Like that, just wow. What is she like when she reflects back at that time? What things did she share with you?
No, I mean, I think it was tough. I think
can
there
imagine.
were times that she wondered, like, can I do this? Do we keep going? Do we? You can't go back.
Yeah.
Can't go back home, right? So, I think, but she always tells me there was a moment when she looked over and just kind of saw all of us sleeping, and she knew, like, I gotta grind.
That's all the reason she needed, right?
That's all she needed. So. We were pretty fortunate. There was a church here in Dallas called North Park Presbyterian. They kind of helped sponsor us, bring us over here, got us an apartment, furnished it, and helped my mom like figure out how to get a driver's license and like how to go and interview and get some jobs. And that ultimately, eventually, ended up her working for 7-Eleven. And 7-Eleven originated here in Dallas. At the time, they were all corporate, so there weren't franchise stores here. And she worked there, kind of worked her way up from like an assistant manager all the way to like a field consultant. So she would be over a handful of 7-Elevens. And whenever there was one that wasn't performing, they'd bring her in. And so I grew up in that environment. I mean, when there was an inspection, all the kids came up, we'd take stuff off the shelves, we'd stock the vault, we'd sweep and mop. I mean, doing that, just kind of grew up in there. And
how old were you when you guys came to Dallas?
Well, it was after 2. So, I mean, yeah, after 2 years old.
Gotcha.
And my mom, I'll never forget this. As I got older, whenever she would be working in a store, and she's like, hey, I'm moving stores. I'm like, oh, why? She's like, oh, this one over here is it's not performing well. And so, this is before there was Starbucks. I mean, this is back then. 7-Eleven was a place where you got your coffee, you got your gas in the morning, you grabbed a donut. Like that was a breakfast place,
one-stop shop.
It was a one-stop shop. And when she would move, I'll never forget, like her customers would move with her.
Wow, that's a testament,
right?
There.
And so when that happened, I remember thinking, why are they following you? She's like, oh, they're here to see me because I know what kind of cigarettes they buy.
Yeah, exactly.
I know the kind of coffee they like. They want me to have this on the fountain machine.
Yeah.
And so that really had a huge impression on me to understand, like, that's the kind of impact you can have on people, even in a place that you wouldn't think. An everyday 7-Eleven.
And that's so powerful that you can become a part of somebody's routine. I think if you can get to that point where you become habitual for somebody, where they need you to start their day because of the relationship, or they're even willing to drive another 3 or 4 miles out of their way to get that daily dose of you, not just what you're giving them, but that relationship. That's
Absolutely.
So powerful.
Yeah. So that had a huge impression on me, and I think that really shaped kind of what we do here at Fat Straws. And I will say this though, having worked there all through my childhood, I worked there when I was 15 years old, left when I was 20. So I had a badge that said serving you for over 5 years, but it was kind of crazy. It was like a little kid with a badge like that. I swore that I would never come back to retail.
So much for that.
Food service, and here I am,
Before we move away from this part of your life, I really want you to paint that picture of how your mom engaged customers. Reflecting back, watching her, I'm sure you've seen her do it hundreds or thousands of times. How did she handle those relationships? Paint that picture of that engagement she had.
Yeah, I think I think Danny Meyer like sums it up really well. Like, service is the technical delivery of what you do, right? That'd be like greeting someone when they come in, performing their transaction properly, saying bye, making sure the store is clean, right? Mm-hmm. And then hospitality is about how you make people feel.
Soul.
Right? And that's what I think she did. Like, she knew them. Not just like knew their name, like she knew them. She knew their kids, and she engaged with them, and she was part of their lives. People would give her Christmas gifts. Like, I don't know the last time you gave your Starbucks barista a Christmas gift, or
never,
right? And so people knew that. And so part of it was just like, it was relational. It was community. It was family, and it wasn't transactional. Right?
Give me an example of something that she did that really just stands out, as far as like what length or what degree she was willing to go to make it personal, to make it hospitality.
I mean, I would say like the first place I really saw was with her team.
Okay.
Right. In kind of this hourly wage type of role where people are very transient. She had people with her for well over 10 years. And so when people were having challenges, she would help them. Like, hey, let me go help this person go get a car. Let me help them figure out how they're going to do this. Hey, this person's kind of kind of going through a rough time. Let me go and like actually like provide dinner for them.
Why is that so powerful?
Yeah, I think you know, it's really about showing people that you care, right? And I think, you know, there's a saying that I subscribe to, is like, I think we all want to be known, deeply known, but we're afraid to be known because we think if you really know who I am, that you won't love me. And so she was really great at just like loving on people.
Yeah.
Right. And that's what I think.
Don't wait
people
for
were
the
drawn
invitation,
to.
right?
That's right.
Yeah,
and I think
love
that's
it.
what people were drawn to.
And like you were saying, sharing some of these things, like your mother would help cover the expense of a car or whatever it is, maybe it's maintenance or whatever. At the end of the day, like, we need security. We need to know that we're secure, that our lives are being taken care of. And that's what the paycheck does, right? That it covers our securities, our the most basic needs. But at the end of the day, we need way more than that to really show up. We need those securities to be covered, right? So if you can help your people cover those things that help you feel secure, then you can show up to work in a much better mindset, right? And that's just so powerful. And then from there, you can focus on so much more. Do you want to reflect on that?
Yeah, no, and I think the thing is that she also challenged them. So maybe a lot of these people weren't challenged, or they didn't have structure, or they didn't maybe have discipline required of them. I mean, she was tough. She wasn't just all the warm fuzzies. She pushed people. But she could see more in someone than they could see in themselves, and help them kind of like
See their own potential.
Yeah, cover that delta.
And that's so important. We don't know because we're so close to who we are. It's and the example I use a lot is like when you're on the island of Manhattan, you don't know you're on an island,
right?
Until you get away from it, you
That's
can
right.
see you're on an island. We're so close to who we are, we don't always know what we're good at because it's relative to our perspective. But until somebody else sees what we're doing relative to other people doing it, they go, wow, like, you're really good at this. Like, we need that reinforcement to help us find our path, to find out what we're good at, what we're bad at. And we don't know our own potential until somebody points it out.
For sure.
It's so powerful. Anything else during this come up of this experience, working at 7-Eleven with your mom? Any key lessons, anything that you think set you up for success in life?
Yeah, again, I think it's what is the recipe of what makes people feel something. And so it's like if you think about it, it's such a sensory experience when you walk into a store, right? You get impressions. Like literally, one of the things I do when we bring new team members on is I'll take them on a tour and go through other businesses, and I'll tell them, and this is something I learned from mom. Like, you walk up, it's like, what does the parking lot look like? Is there a bunch of fingerprints on the door? When you walk in, what do you smell? What do you hear? Like, does someone greet you? And do they really greet you? Do they look you in the eye and greet you? Or is it just transactional? Hey, welcome in. How you doing? Or it's like, hey, what's up, man? Or, hey, how you doing? Or like, hey, Eric, what's going on? Right? And like, that just changes the way you feel. And then when you walk up and you're like, hey, you want to get some coffee? Or like, you know, you're going to get, hey, we just got some fresh donuts over here. Or hey, you want to get a hot dog today? And like, just seeing how she would make people feel coming in. And then when you leave, you know, she made their day just like a little bit better by being there.
So
right?
You started this by saying the equation to making people say that one more time.
Hospitality is really about how you make people feel.
I love it.
Right?
Awesome stuff, man. So you got into IT, right? That was you went from 7-Eleven to IT. Is it worth hovering over this portion of your life?
Yeah, I would say the one thing and why that shaped. If you remember, I said, I'm never going to come back to this kind of retail world. I'm going to get a proper corporate job. And, you know, I did that, and I really enjoyed it. I think one of the things I learned, there's a short stint when I was doing help desk work. Okay. And so what I think I really learned from that was a couple of things. One is like how to communicate and how do you problem solve when you can't actually see something, right? And so trying to get someone to, hey, how do you reboot your computer? How do you troubleshoot something and get them to do it when they can't see, when you can't see it? But I also, the thing that I think on the negative side, I had some really amazing bosses and I had some not so amazing bosses. And I think what I learned from that was there are people I knew who genuinely cared about me, not just what could I do for them, but really genuinely cared about like my growth. And there's other people who didn't. And those people who did, that made me, I mean, again, it makes you feel something.
Yeah.
And that stuck with me. And so after having experienced people who didn't, that kind of was the impetus for me actually leaving IT. It's like, hey, I want to go and create something. I want to create a place where nobody ever feels that way.
I love it, man. So let's unpackage this a little more. You said you learned how to communicate. You also learned how to solve problems. So how were you communicating before, and how did this help you change your communication, this experience?
It taught me, I think, to listen more carefully. I like to talk. So,
yeah, I feel that.
Like
that's why I started a podcast.
but really trying to listen to people and then learning to read between the lines a little bit.
Yeah.
So what someone's telling you, is that actually what's happening, right? So having to kind of, how do you navigate that and unpack that?
Yeah.
That was really it. So it taught me to be a little bit more patient.
Yeah.
Like how do I figure this out and really solve problems? And so that's really carried me forward, is like, oh, we can do this. I know how to do this. Like we can get through this. And I think it was a challenge a lot of times just because you can't see what's going on. And so you're relying on just your verbal communication. And then how do you solve these problems for people? But I mean, I think that was the biggest lesson for me in IT, and then just understanding what good company culture is.
So were you like were you like the tech guy that came and would, like, tell the guy to move out of the way and fix his computer? Is that what you were doing? Like the SNL skit, move?
Yeah. So in college, I got to go and work for IBM out in Washington, D.C., which is like an amazing experience for me. Okay. Had some great mentors there. People really took me under their wing, kind of taught me just so you kind of give you context. This is mid 90s. The internet is just like coming online. Yep. AOL is just kind of coming on. The bank that we were servicing didn't have online banking. They just got a website. Okay. Right. And so I kind of came in at a really interesting time, and that was some really great experience. And then when I came back to Dallas, I got an internship at the Dallas Morning News. Okay. For a summer, and they actually pulled me in and wanted to hire me, and I stayed on full time after that. And so
you're basically helping companies at this point transition to more of a tech
oriented approach. And so think about it at the time is the Morning News is figuring out they have this cash cow in a newspaper, all advertising. And then now they're effectively giving the paper away for free online. Yeah. How do you generate revenue from this thing? And so it was a fun, exciting time because there was all these companies that were reporting, reaching out to Dallas Morning News with hey, we've had these ideas. So then I got to kind of work for this incubator group called Beeler Interactive. So Beeler is the main corporation. And so we got to see some precursors to social media and people are trying to say, hey, we've got cameras. We can see what traffic is coming down. So if you're leaving work, you can get online and see what the traffic is. This is in the 90s, so it was some pretty cool stuff.
Well, I'm just curious about this because I figure in that world of IT where technology in general in the 90s, the mid to late 90s is just so foreign to so many people. You have to be able to listen to what their pain points are. You have to understand before you can help. And I just want to kind of paint that picture for the listeners. What about problem solving? What did you learn about problem solving? You said that's the other thing that you learned.
Yeah, I think maybe before that also, when you're going out on calls, I think I had to learn the communication piece. It was almost like bedside manner, right? So and that leads into the problem solving. Yep. It's walking up, someone's super stressed out.
By the time they're calling you, they're already really pissed.
They're pissed. They have a deadline and having to, this is kind of how do I walk into the situation and not take it personal? And how do I have empathy, right? That was a big thing. This person's really frustrated. They're trying to do their work. They're not technical. Yeah. They're looking to me to help solve this problem.
The world's changing around them. They can't do anything about it.
They can't do it. Yeah. And they have a deadline, or they're not able to do their work, and that's what they're paid to do.
So how do you defuse these people? What was your approach?
Again, listening, smiling, and knowing, trying to figure out, what's really going on. Yeah. And then having empathy. It's man, I'm really sorry. Understand, what's going on. I'm here to help you.
As soon as people know that you're on their team, side, it changes instantly. And I think being mindful and self-aware of the energy that is reacting to them. Are you reacting to them in a negative way? Are you letting their negativity influence you? Totally. Or are you letting your positivity influence them? Yeah. And you got to be, and it's going to go one way or the other. And it's whoever is more of the thing, whether it's positive or negative, is going to win the fight. So you got to go into that mentality knowing that you have to overpower their negativity with your positivity.
Yeah, in a strange way, I was learning hospitality. Yeah. You walk up, you see, how's this person feeling? What kind of energy are they giving off? Are they frustrated? Are they just laughing about it? Are they angry? And so how do we go and diffuse it and try to understand where they're at, and then walk them through like how you're going to help them.
Beautiful.
And then, I mean, it's just like that's the problem we're solving, right?
Okay, we're going to take our first break to thank our sponsors, and we'll be right back to talk about why you transitioned out of IT and why T.
All right.
This episode brought to you by MarginEdge. Never deal with a paperwork nightmare again. Okay, we're back. And what was going on in your life around the late 90s, early 2000s that made you make this transition from IT to T?
Yeah, so a couple things. So when I was at Belo, had a really amazing boss, and he actually picked me to come over and work for that Belo Interactive group. The day I showed up, there was a reorg, and he was no longer my boss. This guy I looked up to, mentor, like
big part of the reason why you're here.
Totally.
Right? Yeah.
New boss, didn't really care. He was like, whatever. And it was just kind of, I was so surprised at how impactful that was. How someone like that can have an impact just on my day. Like, didn't enjoy working for him. He didn't care. He actually made life more difficult. Like, part of the job was being like a tech support for this new group.
Yeah.
And each weekend or each week we had a cell phone that you just carried around. So they're working in the middle of the night, publishing stuff online. So, I mean, I'm getting calls at 2 or 3 in the morning, and I just like, this is not what I signed. This sucks, right?
Yeah.
And so I literally went in and I just said, hey, I'm going to quit. Gave him my badge, left. And then I went to go work for another company, work for Pro Systems. Kind of same deal. Had a really amazing boss. He picked me. We started a new group. And then some things didn't work out. And then I had a new boss. And it was kind of the same deal. And it was in that moment I realized, man, like, my future is really not in my own hands. I'm kind of at the mercy of like who my boss at the time. It's not necessarily what I know, it's who I know. And I had been married for 6 months. So this is 2001. We got married in November 2001. And 6 months later, we opened Fat Straws. So shortly after I got married, I came to my wife and I just said, I mean, we've been grinding at this. I've been grinding this corporate thing, and I want to go do something on my own. I want to go like create something. And I know I'll be too gun shy when we have kids and we have a mortgage. And like, if we fail now, big
easy
deal
to recover.
So she was like, go for it.
Yeah.
I'll support you to go through it. So she was still working. And, so then it was like, well, what are we going to do? and strangely, the thing I knew was retail. and bubble tea was something like I didn't want to go into full restaurant. I used to work.
I kind of want to tap the brakes right there.
Okay.
You shared some stuff that I want to pull back some layers
Okay.
on. First, and it was so in between the lines, I don't even know if my listeners picked up on it. This first individual who had an impact on you. And there's a line that I heard like along the lines of like, you can change the world. You can change the world. And people are like, no, I can't change the world. Who am I to say I can change the world? But the thing is, if you can change the people that you encounter every day and you can make them happy and you treat every relationship like that, then that compounds and you can change the world every day by just changing the mood of the people that you surround you. And this first mentor that you had, right, he did that for you. I think that's living proof that like if you show up with a certain attitude, with a certain care about the people that are around you, you can change their lives. And I think that maybe if you didn't meet this person, like who, you know what I'm saying? Do you want to reflect? Are you picking up on
totally.
Down?
No, I think someone like that you never know who has an impact on you in your life. And it could be someone who works in a place like this.
Yeah.
It could be, I always say like, we have a privilege. It's a privilege to be someone's first job. Because I think we really shape their perception of like work, like what a boss could be. Like that could be great. It could be terrible. Like what a team is, what culture is. And hopefully if you do a great job of that, then they get a taste of like what it's like to be part of a great company and great culture.
Yep.
Right. On the flip side, if it's terrible, you help someone understand like I never want to be part of this again.
Yep.
And so his name was Don Livingston, and over at Belo, he actually not only just it was beyond just the caring aspect. He helped see and make me realize like I could be better. Right. Like I could. He was like, hey, I think you're amazing. Like you could, excuse me. He's like, I think you could you're capable of more than you realize.
This is so powerful, and if we come into that mindset every day, like when we feel like the world is out of control or we don't have control of our situation, just remind yourself that you can change somebody's life by just caring about them in that moment, and like you can change the world. And like the mission statement of Restaurant Unstoppable to inspire, empower, and transform the industry. If we transform the industry by showing up like this every day, and there for our people, there for our employees, and changing them, we will change the world. I'm
for sure
freaking confident about that. Sorry, not to digress too much.
No, it's significant.
Yeah, and the other thing that I wanted to pull from what you shared with us is the low risk with not having a mortgage, not having kids. I think that's one thing that when people don't consider, we're trying to grow a business, we're thinking about like getting money back, or we're, like how are we going to bring money in, but we're not focused on like where the money is going out. And when we can start a business as little like with as little liability as possible, that takes so much stress off. Do you want to reflect on why that was a smart decision for you, not having a mortgage or kids getting started?
I don't know if I stayed in the corporate world, I can't sit here and tell you I would be doing this because it gave us the freedom to fail. If we had, having kids, having a mortgage, I think, we'd feel the pinch a little bit more, and we'd be a lot less likely. And it's harder, I think, when we get set in our ways to pivot like that. Some people can do it, and it's amazing. But for some reason, I just had this feeling like, man, if I go down this road and I don't do something now, I don't know if this door is ever going to open up again for me. Yeah,
well, you got to be a little selfish in the early days, right?
For sure.
And when you have other things like people and mortgages to take care of, like it's harder to be selfish. If that makes any sense.
Yeah, I would say the other thing too is you have your comfort, which is to me oftentimes can be an enemy, And so when we're young like that, I was still used to grinding and hustling, and I had time. I had a great support person. Like Jennifer was amazing, and she was just like, "Go for it. We'll do this together." I mean, she was in it. It wasn't like, that's fine, go kind of, here's your pet project. She was in it with me. And I think that was actually really key, is having a partner who's like in it with you.
So how does she balance you? Like what is it about your partnership that works well?
I would say first, again, kind of going back to the kind of a theme of like, I think she's not someone who nags, which I love. She's somebody who always saw the best version of me. And it was like, you treat someone like how you see them or who they could be instead of like who they were. And then that elevates me to want to aspire to be better, right? And so that's a consummate encourager, support person. I talk too much. She listens really well. I'm scattered. She's very focused. I have lots of ideas. She's the one who can tell me, like,
which one's good.
Only one of them's good, and the other 99 need to go in the trash.
I got you.
Yeah.
So why tea? What was going through your mind? Why did you know tea was going to work, and specifically bubble tea?
Well, I was in the restaurant industry kind of through college. I'd worked in every role: busboy, food runner. I worked in the line. I was waiter. I kind of did everything. And I knew the complexities of running a full-scale restaurant. I also knew that like it was something I could do, but really there was a bubble tea shop I was sitting in a few years before we had gotten married. And I remember sitting in there, and it was dirty. The service sucked. It was crowded. The product was great. The menu was confusing. So the experience was terrible, right? And I remember thinking to myself, gosh, this place is like really busy. Like we could do this, but we could do this so much better. Like we could really like put our twist on it and really nail it. And so it was a fairly lower barrier to entry thing. Like there weren't established bubble tea franchises. So it wasn't like I'm going to go and like get a franchise. So we got to be able to create something like out of the dirt.
Yeah.
And that was like really appealing to me.
And there's a lot of power, and this is something that comes up a lot, and it's a trend that I've definitely picked up on interviewing so many successful restaurateurs, is that when you do something and you're the first to do it, you're automatically the best at it. So when you go someplace, you're instantly if you came to DSW, right, Dallas Fort Worth area, there weren't many bubble tea, if any, right?
There's like a handful, and they were
all,
some of them were just restaurants that happened to carry it as side product.
So if you come into a market and you want to focus on one thing, right, and that isn't being done, you're instantly number one. And there's a lot of power in being the best at something.
Sure.
Right. Do you want to reflect on that?
Yeah, I think the other thing that helped us kind of focus, like we knew we wanted just to do bubble tea. Like a lot of other kind of Taiwanese chains at the time, like over in Asia, did food and did all these things. Like we're just going to do this one thing, and we're going to do it really, really, really well.
Yeah.
And that's what we focused on.
Yes. And some of my research, I saw that traditionally bubble tea has upwards of 100 or 150 different flavors, right?
That's right.
So
we pared the menu down. We really like trying to tighten up the concept, and we chose not to do food. And I think the risk for us was going in and having to educate. So we had this really great product, we thought, but nobody knew about it. So it wasn't like we were selling burgers, right? We weren't selling hot dogs. We were selling something that a lot of people had never experienced.
Yeah.
It's totally foreign. So that was probably the biggest hurdle on the front end. It was like getting to create this fun, unique experience. And that's kind of one of my big drivers is like, if you spend time with me, if I like experience something and I really get value out of it, I don't just want to keep it for myself. Like I'm going to say, we got to go check this place out. Or like, you've got to go eat this, or you've got to try this. Cause like it gives me a ton of like, I get a lot of joy out of that. Like creating and sharing unique experiences.
Yeah. And when you're truly passionate about it, like that energy is like so obvious. I mean, like, you know what I mean? Like, and it comes out, you know, when you're really passionate about it and you want to share something, and like that goes into the experience. But so just to kind of summarize, the power of doing one thing really well. And when you can do one thing really, really well, you're going to be the best. Especially if it's not being done yet, you're going to be number one instantly. And then if you narrow it down and just do that one thing, you're going to you put so much distance between you and everybody else, right? Because you're just putting all of your energy into doing that one thing really well, which is what I'm hearing from you. And then the other thing that you brought to the service is just creating experiences. So I think we have to explain a little bit more about what bubble tea is to kind of paint that picture of why drinking it alone is an experience for somebody who's never had it before.
For sure.
So like what exactly is the bubble tea? Like what is the tapioca? Like what's the story behind
bubble tea originated in Taiwan during the 80s, and so there's a bunch of different kind of renditions of a story, but like the story goes is effectively there were a bunch of like tea stands. Taiwan's really hot in the summertime, so there's a lot of tea stands, and all these vendors are competing for like kids after school money. So they'd set them up outside the schools, and what they would do is they would take tea and milk or tea and juice, and to get everything to mix together, they'd put it in a cocktail shaker and they'd shake it. And because it's hot, they'd serve it cold, right? So obviously, like tea is the number one beverage over there outside of water, right? And so they were selling a lot of tea, trying to get kids to drink it. And so what one vendor did to differentiate himself is he got tapioca, which is a common staple in a lot of like desserts over there. So he'd add tapioca to the bottom of the drink, and then he served it with this really fat straw. That's where we got our name. My wife came up with that name, and it just completely.
You need the fat straw to get the big chunks.
That's
up,
right.
Yeah.
And so it became this like really unique, textural, like visually appealing experience. It was like it just looked cool. There's lots of color in the drink, and then there's a texture component to it.
Exactly, which is in itself the experience.
That's
right?
the experience.
So just trying the drink for the first time, you're creating an experience because it's so unique. It's so left field, right?
Right.
Especially to Western culture. Just a fun fact: I was researching tapioca. It's tapioca, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Originated in Brazil. I didn't even like. It's crazy how like. We grow up, we have these perceptions of things coming from certain places.
Right,
you think of tapioca, tea coming from Asia, but it really came from Brazil. Same thing with potatoes. Like you always think potatoes, Ireland, right? Growing up, and like, oh no, that came from Peru. You're like, this is crazy. Fun facts. Anyway, moving forward. So what else were you doing to elevate this experience in the early days?
Yeah, so I mean, the thing is like we're going to spend a lot of time obviously on the product and the way it looks, but branding was really important. But I think, again, I go back to like how we make people feel. There's no substitute. Like if I go to a place, they can miss on like the interior. They can miss on, maybe even kind of miss on the product. Mm-hmm. But if they make me feel great, if the hospitality, they're really serving hospitality, that's usually, I think, is a great recipe for success. And so I thought back to like, what did my mom do? Right?
Yeah.
And like, what were those experiences?
Yeah.
And so we just got to know people.
I love it.
Right? And engage them. And a lot of people were like, hey, like just I think being transparent, kind of being vulnerable and saying, hey, like, how's this drink? Like, it's not great. Like, what would you do to make it better? So we actually, a lot of our drinks sometimes came from the feedback of our customers. Like, hey, could you make this? This is awesome.
Well, just showing them that you care about their opinion, and when you listen to them, it makes them feel like they have an ownership over it.
For sure.
Because like now they influence the product and they're a part of it. You know,
Yeah.
you're making them a part of the process, which is so powerful in itself.
Yeah, a funny story. There's a gentleman, Amor, and he came in and we were serving Vietnamese iced coffee, which is like really strong coffee sweetened with condensed milk. He says, hey, can you make this like blended? And so we made it, and like he's like, it's pretty good. And then he came back, he's like, hey, it's missing something. And so we threw some ice cream in there to get it to like mix better. It wasn't so slushy, it was a little bit creamier. And he's like, this is it.
Nice.
And he always jokes, he's like, the reason we have that on the menu is because he and so what was really cool is to see him come in with his little girl who's now, you know, married, right?
Oh, that's crazy.
But like see her come in and like see them literally grow up before our eyes, which
That's
is always
awesome.
really cool.
So what were the early days like? What were your biggest challenges opening a business? Like the nuts and bolts of like, okay, like did you guys get a loan? Did you have money put away from your IT? I mean, little overhead because you're just doing tea. So what do you need to create tea?
Sure, great question.
Hot water?
So we we were really fortunate. So there was a location close to where we were living over in Plano, and it was there was a noodle shop next door called Noodles Avenue that we went to all the time. And we walked by next door and we saw it. It was like dark in there, and we were wondering, there's this place called Joanna Juice, right? It was like a smoothie bar. And we looked, and it was like, I couldn't tell if it was gonna open or had been shut down. So I called the landlord and was like, hey, what's going on with the space? We're like, oh, it's been dark for 2 years. I was like, huh? Like, it's like, is it for lease? I said, you need to contact the owner.
Side note, Joanna Juice is such a great name. For, all I could think of was like, do you want a juice?
Yeah, it's called
sorry.
Joanna
I
Juice,
just couldn't
right?
Get over that. Keep going. Sorry.
So then we ended up contacting them and said, yeah. So the guy had opened a couple, but he also owned a software company, and it was taken off, and he just said, he had a go dark clause, so he shut it down. It was open for 4 months. He shut it down. He was just paying rent for 2 years, and no one had actively came in and tried to sublease. So it's like, can we sublease from you? So we went through the hoops, and they had everything, literally a completely furnished store, blenders, cash registers, tables and chairs, shelving, ice machines, turnkey.
Yeah.
I mean, literally everything in there. And, I say ignorance is bliss. Like the owner said, hey, we want $50,000 for all the equipment. Like if someone told me that today, I'd be all over it. But again, my ignorance, and not because of my great negotiation skills, I just said, it's like way too much. We'll give you like $5,000 for it. And we went back and forth, and we got everything in there for $9,000.
Wow.
So he got a turnkey restaurant.
Jeez.
I mean, it was a shell construction.
ludicrous.
He put probably close to, back then, probably like $300,000 or $400,000 into building that restaurant. So what did we have to do? Coat of paint, clean it up, new sign, change the menu, and we were good to go. So I put in $35,000, and I did have a business partner at the time. I think he put in $35,000, and that's what we used to seed it to get going.
Try to do that today. $70,000. Good luck.
Impossible.
Yeah, right. This is early 2000s, so it wasn't like it was that long ago.
That's right. That's right.
In this century. So
I mean, I don't think I'll ever come across a deal like that again. But it was incredible.
Nice.
I mean, and then we went in. We were like, hey, look at this 3-door like reach-in refrigerator. Like, what does this cost? Oh, it was like $6,000.
what were your biggest challenges in the early days?
Yeah. So in the beginning, I think I always tell the story. Like, I got so excited about creating this whole thing, and it was a sprint to get it open, and then we got it open. And then we were running it, and then probably 3 weeks go by, and I realized, wait a minute, I've got to run this thing like every single day. So in the beginning, honestly, the challenge was the limitation of my thinking, which was like I had to do everything. I had to make sure all the drinks were right. I had to make sure every customer was being, handled properly. And so I worked there all day from 7:30, 8 o'clock till 11 at night, all day, every day. And then I knew probably a few months into it, there was a problem, which was I got really excited when I got to go to Costco to pick up supplies because that was the one time I got to leave the store.
Okay.
Right. And so like I it was just like this realization of like, hey, it was fun to create this thing, but just being there all day, every day and trying to like put the whole restaurant on my shoulders was unsustainable. Right. And so after that, I realized like I think we need to hire some employees.
Okay, so you're the only one here. You and
It's
your business
me.
partner? Your wife?
My business partner worked like if I was working, he wasn't, and if he was working, I wasn't.
Okay.
And then, but in the beginning, because he kept his job, I was working the whole time.
So was he like a more of a financial partner?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay.
And he would just kind of work on the weekends. I quit my job. I went all in on this.
Yeah.
And then I had a buddy who was helping me out, so he was with me pretty much all day, every day, just the two of us. And so eventually we started hiring some kids. And we had a few kids working for us, and I'll never forget this day because it had, again, just like see it as clear as day. I'm working super frustrated because like they're not helping, they're kind of just standing around and didn't really say anything. And then the kid comes over to me, his name's Andy. He's like, hey, like you look really like frustrated, like can we help you? I was like, yeah. I was like, why aren't you guys helping me? Like I'm busting my butt over here.
We're looking for a direction.
And he said he's like, we want to just tell us what to do.
Yeah, right.
And like it was in that moment because the way I kind of grew up and was wired is like I go into situations, see what needs to be done, and just step up and do it, right? And without being given a lot of direction. These kids were hungry to work, but they needed direction. And it was in that moment I was like, I haven't trained you.
Yeah.
I haven't created a team, employee manual.
Yeah.
Like so. That's me on the course. Like, oh, I've got to actually properly train these kids.
So what did that look like? Where did you go to learn how to train? Did you even know how to train people? Like, did you know what you needed to do to get them to the place where they could do their job?
Yeah, candidly. I mean, I looked at other like company restaurant employee manuals and kind of saw how they were broken
find
down.
These? Did you ask for them or did you steal them or like?
I got access from other kids. Like, hey, here's a Boston Market one, or here's one from I forget what other companies there were, but we looked through them. I don't know if we could find them online back then, but then it was like, started thinking through like logically, like how would we put this together? What do they need to know? Well, they need to know a little bit about who we are. Mm-hmm. They need to know about like what our core values are. Mm-hmm. They need to know, then it's like more kind of the legal stuff. Well, harassment and workplace diversity and all that stuff. And then we got into creating a handbook, which is kind of covered policy and procedure, what I do if I'm late. And then it was like, training, like how do we train people how to do recipes? And so I just kind of thought through, honestly, me and actually another person who works here, Alana, she kind of put it together and we went with it and we've been refining it honestly ever since.
Beautiful. And now today you can go to restaurantowner.com and get all that stuff. It's a great resource.
Right.
Yeah,
I know.
So I'll be sure to link to that in the show notes. It's templates of everything you need, operations manuals, checklists. It's a great resource.
I remember signing up for them probably like 5 years into it.
Yeah.
And like looking at like, oh, this is really great stuff.
Yeah. Because you don't have to reinvent the wheel. Like
that's right.
You can take these systems that have been created and just plug them into your business. So, okay, going from there, like how did that start to change your business once you started empowering your people? Any like tricks of the trade that you can share with us on making that transition to working in the business to on the business?
I think I think it took a while for me in that regard because I tend to wanted to hold the reins a little too tightly. And I think it was 2007, our tea supplier, and I think I did that even into the second store. We had kind of built the team, and I had a general manager, and I was able to kind of step out more.
Yeah.
But even going in, when I opened the second location, it was the same thing. I was in it all day, and that's kind of how I associated, like, this is how it's going to be. You open one, you go full tilt for about a year, and then slowly you can start to win yourself off. And then our tea supplier, this company called Art of Tea, a buddy of mine who owned it, he said, you should go check out this peer group for entrepreneurs called EO.
Okay.
Entrepreneurs Organization.
Yep.
And that really like changed my thinking.
How? What was the biggest way this group changed your thinking?
So the first thing is, one, I think entrepreneurial journey is very lonely, right? And
lonely at the top.
Lonely at the top, and I think hanging out with all my kind of corporate 9-to-5 buddies, they just didn't understand. They didn't understand like sweat and payroll. They didn't understand like having to Like you don't, even though you're not working, your brain doesn't stop. You're always thinking about work. And especially being in retail, it's like it's 7 days a week, right? And it's morning till night. It's all day, every day. And so joining this peer group, you sit around with people and you get to realize like, oh man, these
was this in person?
Yeah.
Okay.
So the organization is really about, getting entrepreneurs together. You create this like peer group and where you get to share, learn, and grow together.
Yeah.
And I think the key to it though is showing up again. I talk about being known, but being afraid to be known because you don't think you'll be loved. Yeah. And so one of the first things we do is we all go and kind of tell our life story. We do what we call a lifeline, the highs of highs, the lows of lows. And once everyone kind of shares, you realize, oh man, everyone's been through a lot of stuff, right? And then that kind of puts our guards down. And then when we get together and we meet each month, we talk about real stuff, right? So sometimes there might be stuff that I'm stressed out about that I may not want to tell Jennifer because I don't want her to worry, or I can't talk to my buddy who runs who has a 9-to-5 job. You can't relate. Yeah. And so this group is really like someone that, one, I can be who I am. Yep. They get what I'm going through.
Maybe they've gone through it.
And then the key is we can't give advice. This is a really interesting concept. You can't give advice. You can only share experience. So each time we meet, we do these presentations, and I say, hey, I'm having this big challenge with, example, I'm having a challenge with like a team member, like a manager or something. Yeah. And so after I've kind of given them facts, they can ask some questions, and then everyone goes around and has a few minutes, and all they can do is share their experience. They can only speak from like, I've done this, instead of you need to do this. Because oftentimes giving advice is about me thinking what's best for you, right? And it comes from a good place, but it's generally like, because I know what's best for you, versus you're around a table of like 6 or 7 other people who share their experience. You feel connected, and then you can synthesize your own solution from that without being directed on
and no
what to
two
do.
situations are exactly the same.
Totally.
So you might have to take a mix of like the 5 different scenarios that other people did that worked for them and make it your own by like, taking a little bit of their experience, taking a little bit of their experience, and a little of her experience, and a little of his, and making your own solution. Because it's not black and white. It's one thing I've learned. The more I learn, the more I realize I don't know anything.
That's right. And the benefit too is it's not just the person presenting its value. Something that like if you're presenting and I'm in the room, something that someone else says, that's my takeaway. It's like, man, I've never thought about it the way you thought about it. So everyone gets value out of it, right? Yeah. And so going back to like this peer group, where it made me start to create space to say, hey, I need to spend time thinking about the business, not just doing all the time. Like, what do I want? Like, why am I doing what I'm doing? Like, contemplating these things. What kind of culture do I want to create? Like, is there an end game? Is there like build it up to a point and sell it, or like in this for the long haul? So it was less about the advice and more about what questions should I be asking myself and creating space to think about it.
You don't know until you know.
You don't know.
Yeah.
And then having a peer group to bounce a lot of these ideas off of.
And just something real quick for anybody who's listening to this, like you can go out there. And like the restaurant industry is very unique, it's very specific. You can go into your community, find other business people in your community that you admire, that you think they're running a good business, and just be like, hey, like this is where I'm at. Maybe you feel the same way. Do you want to get together once a month and have a couple beers, or maybe for coffee or whatever, and just like lean on each other? Like there's nothing stopping you guys who are listening to this to go out there and to start your own little peer group. Some people call them masterminds. I host a monthly mastermind where it's 4 people that we just get together and we meet over Skype. It doesn't have to be in your community. It can be anywhere, but it's so powerful. So just what are you waiting for? I guess is what I'm saying. Go out there and start your own group if you feel like this will help you. Start it.
I mean, so even EO is a global organization, over 14,000 members, and most major cities have a chapter. So I have a local forum. Yeah. We meet monthly. I'm also in a virtual forum. That's industry specific. Nice. So it's all restaurateurs.
I'll link to that in the show notes. Yeah.
So it's super cool.
Cool. Thank you for sharing. Okay. You narrow your success down to a few things. I think we should just bring those straight to the surface, and maybe we can dissect them if you'd like. So you survived the 2008 recession, right? Tough year. 2009 was probably a tough year, and you attribute that to quality control, outstanding service, community-based marketing, and an emphasis on strong relationships. So what did you mean by quality control? How were you leaning on quality control to survive this recession?
Yeah, I think in that time, and again, it was something that I learned through another person in EO. He was sharing about a bakery over in California, and the recession hits, and what everyone was doing is they were cutting food costs. Let me use cheaper butter. Let me use the lower quality grade cheese. And he said, but what this company did in turn was like, no, we're going to continue to provide quality. We're going to continue to, this is what gave us success instead of just it being about numbers. And then I really took that to heart. And so one of the things we really focused on was like, hey, when a customer that I used to see 3 times a week is now only coming every other week because they lost their job, like we got to make sure that because they're carving out, time and budget to like spend money with us, like it's got to be an incredible,
the best experience.
It's got to be great. Like we can't cheapen it,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so that's something we really focused on, is like making sure the quality was always there, making sure, and it's not just the product, but just the whole experience.
Yeah.
Like I remember, I still never forget, like when it was like in the height of recession, having kind of this all hands meeting is like, guys, like now more than ever, we've got to like really dig in and like provide world-class hospitality, because people like the resources aren't there. If they're coming out, there's so many other places they can go. And if they're limited on where they're going to go and they choose us, we got to make sure it's like, it's special.
And just a side note, we don't need to wait for a recession to start doing this, right?
No.
And like that mentality of doing what you do even better. Kaizen, is that I know you're a fan of Toyota. What's the CEO's name again, or the founder? You mentioned his name earlier. The 5 layers of why. Right?
Yeah.
But anyway, back to Kaizen is that mentality of constant improvement, right? And that's what quality control is. It's looking at what you have and how can you make it better, right? Mm-hmm. And it's always trying to improve. And like I said, you don't have to wait for a recession to start doing this. Like start doing this now, right?
Yeah.
So what things do we need to consider when we're trying to make these little tweaks to constantly improve?
Yeah, and I think another part of like quality control, or let me back up. I think another part of like what enabled us to have success during that time was I also realized I can't just sit in the store waiting for people to come. I need to go out, right? And it's about relationships. It's about connecting with people. And so I had this moment like I need to get out. And so what I started doing is I literally would just go out. I'd go to office buildings, introduce myself, give out free drink cards.
Guerrilla marketing.
That's what I did. Just invite people to come in. And we saw that really bear fruit.
Especially when you're something that people just don't, like, nobody's going to be like, I'm really in the mood for, what's the technical term for the tea again? Bubble tea? Like, people don't know what bubble tea is.
That's right.
So, like, they're not going to have a hankering for it. Like, you have to introduce it to them. You have to put it on their radar. So
or we'd have to bring it to them.
Yeah.
Because even trying to explain it, it's something you have to experience.
Yeah.
And there's no substitute for, letting someone see it, taste it, and experience it versus giving someone a card, right?
I love it. One other thing that's coming to my mind that you mentioned earlier is when you're training somebody, you bring them to other places. And I think when it comes to quality control, we need to paint that picture of perfection. And sometimes we need to put that picture of perfection up against something that's not perfect, so you can see the difference, so you can see the importance of the value. Do you want to reflect on that?
Yeah, so the quality control piece, one way we've got standards for that, but one of the things we do to measure it is we implemented mystery shopping. And so the mystery shop is curated on, because we can obviously measure food costs, we can measure sales, we can measure labor, but how do you measure like how you execute on the experience day in and day out?
Yeah.
The only way you could do that is like having, a mystery shopper come in. And so we created this questionnaire that basically said, okay, once you come in, like it's this, I always say it's all the experience. Like, what do you see? Is it clean? What do you hear? Is there music? What do you smell?
Right? Music's off right now because we're recording the podcast.
And then what do and then it says, when you approach, did someone greet you? Right? Did they make eye contact? Right? And so
you set the standards.
Yeah, or was it just kind of generic? And so that way, once we've created this process, right, then you can train that.
So you're creating a vision of what the perfect experience is.
Correct.
And you're listing the most important things. And like that's what you're basing this off of.
Right. And then we model it, and then we also practice it. So during the training, we'll do mock. I'll walk in like, hey, like it's about how do we actually engage in conversation? so it's not transactional.
Awesome.
Because it could be, hey, how you doing? Regular or large? Do you want bubbles?
Yeah.
Okay, it'll be ready in a second.
Yeah.
That's just transactional.
I love it. So I think we covered the quality control pretty good, unless there's anything you want to add to that.
Yeah.
Okay, so outstanding service. I think we've talked about this a lot already, but why don't you paint that picture of what you do in your business to make sure outstanding service happens? How do you cement that into your culture?
I think it's got to be, you have to process engineer it. It's got to be part of it. But I think, like I said, you've got to model it and you've got to practice it. And again, service is the technical delivery. It's about the hospitality. It's about how you make people feel. And so how do we make sure when we engage with people that it goes beyond the transactional aspect of someone coming in?
So how are you making sure, like, I mean, you can't put people into that hospitality mode, like they either, some people argue you either have it or you don't, but how are you making sure that your employees or frontline employees are showing up with hospitality?
Yeah, so once we really spent time as a team discovering what our core values were, rather than just like, these are our core values, integrity, and
because we saw on Boston Market.
That's right, and we put them on the wall, right? we really like, it was a really cool exercise. We went through and said, okay, if like we were going to go and expand in like world domination, like, and who are like some key team members that you would want to be, right? Yeah. Who would you want it to be on your team? And then we went through and we wrote down all their traits and all their qualities, and then we circled like what was in common. And then from that, we realized like 3 things for us. It's about building community, which is really about fostering relationships and deep personal connections, serving others, right? And I talk about serving others as not just your customers, but serving your team, and then taking ownership, which we talk about being a steward. Like ownership is owning it, like owning your wins and owning your mistakes, and treating like the company like resources as you would, being a steward of it. And so part of our interview process is filtering for that. We ask questions that try and flesh out, is this person like passionate about building community, serving others, taking ownership?
What questions are you asking to get after that?
Well, the interview process, we ask really 3 questions. Like, I ask them, one, how do they define community? I want to see if they even understand what it means. And then like, okay, give me examples of like how this is important. Why is this important in your life? Right? Give me some examples of like, what does it mean to you to serve others? Because, what we want to filter is everyone going into interviews is going to try and put their best foot forward. Yeah. And like, I usually start every interview with like, look, I know that's what you're trying to do, but like for me to want to hire you and for us to work together, I really need to know who you are. Right? I know we're all flawed. No one's perfect. So don't try and sell me your best version of yourself. I just want you to be real. And if there's that connection and we see that there's those core values and we like how they answer those questions, then we start going through more some of the technical stuff.
Okay. So I'm curious, like you said that it's about relationships, it's about deep personal connections. Paint that picture. What is a deep personal connection?
I say it starts with our team first.
Yep.
So if you walk into a place, you can usually tell if the team really gels, if they really enjoy each other, they're having fun. And that, I think that's infectious. You get swept up in that.
Yeah.
And so first we've got to do a good job of like taking care of our team. And then when customers come in, it's the engagement. It's like trying to get to know their name, trying to like figure out and ask them questions, right? Hey, what's going on today? Oh, are you coming from school? Or like, oh, you're heading back to work. And over time we get to really know people. And what we find is when we share our lives with people first, that creates an opportunity for them to want to share with us.
So you got to open up first. You got to open the door. Yeah.
I mean, we've got to be willing to be vulnerable with our stuff and talk about our stuff. And I think that's what invites others to participate in that conversation with us.
I love it. You can tell these guys just opened at like 15 minutes ago. We got the blenders going. It's getting busy. I love it. There's nothing better than being on site. That's for sure. So so we have 2 other bullets I want to hit before we start to wrap up the free-flowing portion of the conversation. Community-based marketing, right? And then the other one is, I think we might be able to pass over the relationships. I think we kind of hit that pretty good. But what do you mean by community-based marketing?
Yeah, so one of the things we do, kind of part of that guerrilla piece, is like getting out, making ourselves known, sharing our products, sharing the experience with people. We go to schools. We want to be meeting with principals, PTA presidents, coaches, band directors. That's a big market for us. Is like kids and families.
Yep.
And so we really kind of start with elementary school, middle school, and high schools, and really build those relationships. Corporate caterings too is like going into businesses and like, how do we hit the easy button? So it's really a partnership. It's advocacy. It's not just like, hey, we can sell you stuff. It's like, how do we help each other and be part of each other? And so like, one of the things that I got really clear on, what makes this location really unique, and talk about community. If really what's the fullest expression of like living out that core value would be to have the community that we serve actually own equity in the store.
Okay.
So what we did was, when we were getting ready to build this, I really sought investment from the neighborhood, the local neighborhood. And I got this idea from the restaurant in our neighborhood and some guys that I know that run it. And they said it's been great because, one, it's not a huge investment. They're not dumping in like tons and tons of money, but you make these smaller like $10,000 like units where people can invest in. But then it's fun. They get to be a part of it. They get to support it.
Ownership.
And we want their kids to work here. Yeah. We want to like, hey, if you got parties, we want to be part of all this for you guys. And so that was like a really full expression of like building community, is to have people actually like take ownership in it.
So I'm curious, when you're going to find these people to bring into your community, are you going into people? Are you searching for people that might be like you in the sense of the same culture, that
Absolutely.
same desire,
core values?
Yes,
we've got to be aligned.
When I say
values.
culture, I mean even further. Like they might come from Asian descent, and they want this thing that relates to them in their life. They want to be a part of it because they're prideful of it too. Are you going after?
Yeah, I mean, not so much. I mean, I think it's really more just whether their core values aligned. Honestly,
okay.
Like if they believe in the three things that we do, that's really important.
Nice.
That's kind of the key alignment for us.
Terry, I'm loving this conversation. We've covered a lot, but we haven't even talked about you opening the 2 other locations. I don't think we need to necessarily dissect it hugely, but is there anything that you were hoping we would discuss, or anything that you think is of value, something that you can bring to the table that's unique to your knowledge and your experience before we go to the speed round?
Yeah, and I think going back to like the bumpy road of like entrepreneurship and trying to grow and scale a restaurant. It wasn't always, we did have growth, but there were a lot of other things, like pretty tough situations that we had to go through. Specifically, when we opened the second location, we actually were going to open 2 locations at the same time. Construction costs went way over budget. I actually had 2 leases signed.
Wow.
So we built one restaurant and had one that sat there.
Oof.
And, I was pretty much screwed. I mean, they could have just come after me and it would have taken the whole thing down. But one thing that, I kind of relied on was I'm just going to be honest. I'm not going to try and, weasel my way out of this. So I went and I sat in front of the owner of this property and his whole team. And I told him exactly where we were at. I told him the truth. And I said, I don't have the money to build out this 3rd location. I know you have every legal right to come after me, and if you choose to do that, like, that's fine. I mean, we'll just do what we have to do, but this is a situation.
Yeah.
And it's not, I didn't plan on this. I wasn't trying to do this maliciously.
It just is.
And he sat there and sternly looked at me for, it felt like an eternity. And he just said, there's no need to squeeze a dry lemon. And he tore up the lease.
Wow. There's something to be said about that. I think at the end of the day, people are good, right? We want to do the right thing, and usually when we get angry or pissed off, right? It's because we can tell the other person's not doing the right thing, and we want to retaliate because we're not being taken care of. So if you take the approach that you took, where you said, I'm wrong, I screwed up, I'm at blame, like, this is all me, like, I'm taking complete ownership, like taking ownership, one of your core values, that diffuses things when you own it. People don't want, when you're doing the right thing, people aren't going to come after you. Or there's some jerks out there that might still try to squeeze a dry lemon, right?
Sure,
but at the end of the day, like, there's just so much power in transparency and honesty and vulnerability when you own things like that. That's a huge lesson to take.
And I had no control in that situation.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, I'll never forget, there was a moment like laying in bed, I was just thinking like, tomorrow could be it.
Yeah.
But
yeah. And you've been in business now for almost 20 years, 18 years, 4 locations. And I think a lot of people, like, when they think of growth, they think of outward growth. And I'm such a broken record right now. My listeners are like, here he goes again. When they think of growth, they think of outward growth, but you clearly have that mentality of what can we, like, quality control, right? Instead of putting that energy out into becoming bigger, let's become better, right? And when you become better, you attract onto yourself so much opportunity that what ends up happening as a result is outward growth.
For sure.
And I think you see that because you're at 4 locations, 18 years, and now you're looking to expand even more. Like, what's your plan for the future?
Yeah, we're still looking around DFW, and really we want to take this model of community microfinance, community funded model moving forward. Because I really believe that's what's exciting for me. I'd love to have a lot of locations, but honestly, like the thought of having a bunch of locations and making a lot of money, like I think everyone wants to do that, but that's not what drives me and motivates me. Again, I go back to the relational piece. It's like I love the idea of like being in it together with a group of people. And
you lose that when you scale.
We do. And so how do we continue to do this, what we're doing here, and replicate that moving forward?
I love it.
Really, it's about scaling impact. Right?
So I have one question that is kind of like jabbing at me, and it's kind of has to do with markets, right? The ever-changing market that we live in. Straws are kind of a controversial issue right now.
For sure.
I mean, for the past couple of years, they've been at kind of forefront. Plastic in general is taking a lot of heat right now. So we have a business that, depends on straws. It's in the name, right?
For sure.
And what are you doing to kind of combat that?
Yeah, we're looking at alternatives right now. So there's the paper ones are not super crazy about because they kind of lose their shape. There's some that are made out of bamboo that we're entertaining, some that are made out of like seaweed. So I think the big thing for us is if we're going to switch, it needs to be not only biodegradable, but it needs to be marine friendly. And there's not a ton of options for that right now. So it's just trying to find something that's going to fit.
And you don't have the traditional straw. So
that's right.
So like somebody's going to come up with a solution, but it might take an extra 2 years before they can manufacture that same material and give you the wide option.
Correct.
So it's a real challenge.
Yeah, we've tested some paper ones, but again, I think we're looking for something that's going to be marine friendly, which I think is a little bit trickier.
Yeah. So if you guys know of any products out there, we'll give you Terry's contact information at the end. And what about business? Has business taken a hit because of this kind of
no?
stigma?
The thing is, as an alternative, we do sell metal reusable straws.
Okay.
Right? We sell reusable mason jars to serve our drinks in. So
interesting. I was just so curious how you're handling that challenge.
I think that's also, candidly, I think based on where you're at, I think if we were in California, we'd probably feel a little bit more pressure than here in Texas. And so, it's just, I think a lot of where you're geographically located can impact that.
That makes sense. So one question I've been asking all my guests before we go to the speed round, the mission statement I mentioned earlier is to inspire, empower, and transform the industry. How have you transformed? Who is the Terry today versus the Terry back in 2002 when you were getting started?
Oh, man. That's a great question. I would say one of the biggest things about me that's transformed is I realized that I don't have to do it all myself. I realized that actually probably one of my challenges is like not asking for help, either out of pride, either out of like, hey, I've got to figure it out on my own. And so one of the things I think for me that's changed and transformed is like how I approach challenges. And it's not to hide, hunker down, and work harder. It's about being open with it, sharing it with more people, and then seeing how I can get through this with the support of others instead of having to do it on my own.
Great stuff. Great conversation. One more quick break to thank our sponsors. We'll be right back to bust out a true speed round.
All right.
This episode brought to you by MarginEdge. Never deal with a paperwork nightmare again. We're back, and the first question I have for you is, what is your it factor, a habit, a trait, a characteristic you believe most contributes to your success?
I do a 5:30 a.m. accountability call.
Ooh, 5:30 a.m.
from
accountability
Monday through Friday, and it's deep work, deep focus, and it's communal. We do a Zoom call.
5:30.
We state our purpose for the day and what we're going to do deep work on for 90 minutes. We mute, and then we work for 90 minutes.
What have you been doing deep work on lately?
Business development, really. Like, how do we get out and get in front of more people?
I love it. Great stuff. What is your biggest weakness?
Not asking for help.
Ooh, how are you overcoming that?
Asking for help.
What is one question you ask or thing you look for during the interview process when you're growing your team?
interview question. I always start with wanting to know who they really are, not digging into. I mean, I start with, don't impress me. I want to know who you really are.
Nice. What's your biggest challenge today?
I think there's more competition for us now, and how do we respond to that thoughtfully?
Okay. More competition specifically with
With bubble tea, for
Okay.
sure.
What's your plan for that?
Product differentiation.
Quality control.
Yeah, but I think we got to continue what we need. We're doing what we're doing, but the big thing is innovation.
Got you. Share one code of conduct or behavior you teach your team. This is a core value, a way to be, a way to act.
I would say really the big one, the number 2 core value, serving others. Serve your team.
What is one uncommon standard of service you teach your team? So this is something that's common within your 4 walls regarding service, but not common within the industry.
I think having empathy for others.
I dig it. What is one book that's a must read to make us a better person or restaurant owner?
Setting the Table by Danny Meyer.
Number 1 recommended book by far, and that one's on Audible. If you guys have not absorbed that book yet, make sure you do it and lower the resistance. Get it on Audible. Just listen to it on your drive to work. Head over to audibletrial.com/unstoppable, and you're going to support the show. And thank you if you use that link. This is episode 693, I believe. So we'll have the links over there. The next question I have for you is, what is one thing you feel restaurateurs don't do well enough or often enough?
Have a deep understanding of financials.
And where do you go to get that deep understanding?
Spending time with financial people
There you go.
and educating yourself on
love
finances.
it. Yeah. I think it's really true. I created a short course that I'm looking to revamp. It was my first course called the Profit First course. Maybe you've heard of Profit First. Great money management system that's simple for people like me who are simple when it comes to money. So I'll link to that too, or at least I'll let you know where to learn more about it. One piece of technology you've adopted within your 4 walls. So this is technology like a POS or maybe like online ordering or anything along those lines, technology that you're leveraging to improve your business.
This is actually more internal, but Slack.
Ooh.
We use Slack as an internal communication tool. When you have multiple locations, how do you disseminate information effectively and quickly?
Yeah.
And using Slack has been very impactful.
Slack is recommended often on the show, and there's a book out there called Indistractable. I had the author on the show who has a whole chapter dedicated to best practices for Slack, because it can be distracting.
For sure.
But it can also be a great tool when used right. So if you want to learn more about how to use Slack, check out that book, Indistractable by Nir Eyal. I'll link to that in the show notes as well for you guys. And then I almost forgot to ask you, name one service that you've hired. So this is a group, maybe a person that you've outsourced that is strong where you're weak.
O&H brand design. We did a rebrand in 2016, and I think it really helped propel our brand forward.
Nice. And that was O&H brand design?
Mm-hmm.
And who's the person behind that? Is there
Brian Owens.
All right. We'll link to that as well. And this is the last question. It's a doozy, so be ready for it.
Okay.
If you got the news, you'd be leaving this world tomorrow. All the memories of you, your work, and your restaurants would be gone with your departure, with the exception of 3 pieces of wisdom that you could leave behind for the good of humanity and for your legacy. What would those 3 pieces of wisdom be?
I would start with what I started the show with, is that failure is not tied to outcome. Failure is not trying. Go for it.
I love it.
Right? That's number 1. Number 2, I think, don't be afraid to be fully known.
Nice.
I think vulnerability, teaching vulnerability. I think the thing that connects us is not our wins; it's our brokenness. And I think the more we share our brokenness with people, that's how we connect and relate.
I love it. And number 3.
Number 3, I would say, and this is probably more personal, is find peer groups, find peers, get help, spend time with like-minded individuals. I think that's how we really we can go faster alone, but we can go further together.
Man, awesome. Great stuff. I've really enjoyed this conversation. I wrap up every chat by having my guests call somebody out. So who do you respect and admire in this industry? Somebody that you think would make a great guest mentor like you made for us today.
Good buddy of mine, someone I talk shop with very frequently, is Kyle Gordon.
Okay.
He owns a company called Dilla's Case.
Dude, I know Kyle.
Okay.
Oh man.
Have you had him on already?
No, but it's funny because he's doing great, and he saw me at a Mexican restaurant in Austin once, and recognized me, and I've been kind of following him. He focuses on quesadillas, right?
Yeah.
He's up to like 3 or 4 locations.
He's
now?
about to open his fourth here in town. He's got a licensing deal in Shreveport too, so that's number 5.
You have no idea how happy you just made me by calling
Kyle's awesome.
Kyle out.
Yeah.
Kyle, look out, man! Your time has come. You're coming on the show. I can't wait. And how can we connect with you if we want to maybe learn more about EO or any of these programs you're in, or we have questions, or maybe we want to come join your team? Maybe we're in Dallas and we're looking to be a part of your team because of how awesome you are.
Yeah, you can email me, Terry, Terry, @fatstraws.net. Also, I'm on social media. You can find us on Instagram,
Beautiful.
/ @fatstraws, and on Facebook as well.
And this is episode 693. Head over to restaurantunstoppable.com/693. I'll have a summary of today's discussion, as well as a link to any tool or service or network recommended. And again, just thank you so much for taking the time to share your story, your knowledge, your mentorship. There is no questioning, Terry. You are unstoppable.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Cheers.